Dear DevDot, wait a minute. This is a different thing. Right. Welcome to Cian's Canon Corner. In each episode, I dive into a thing I love, tell you what it's about, why I love it, and how it's influenced my work. For this first episode, we're not actually doing that though. Weird. Instead, we're looking back on 2023, and in the spirit of this channel being about making games, talking about my top 10 favorite games of 2023. And, there'll be some other games I want to shout out too. And yeah, we'll talk about some disappointments as well. Here's how this will work. The first 9 games I talk about are not ranked in any order. The last game, though, that's the one. The game of the year. The canonical, objective, best game of 2023. In my opinion. At the moment. After that, the games that didn't quite hit. And then some other games I want to shout out. All the gameplay footage you see in this video, it was captured by yours truly. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon. Landing in an ice-coated city on the planet Rubicon, the pilot 621 makes their way through enemy upon enemy. Mercenary, revolutionary, it doesn't matter. Whoever pays gets their service. The legendary handler Walter guides 621 as they rise the mercenary ranks, gaining the trust of the corps, sometimes working with the revolutionary Rubicon Liberation Front. It all just matters if the job's right. 621 speaks with actions, not words, cutting through enemy units, mowing them down with countless missiles, lasers, and plasma weaponry. And in the end, 621, call sign Raven, leaves their mark and legacy on Rubicon, be that one of ruin, hope, or something else altogether. I first played an Armored Core game in 2002, 2003-ish, at my local drugstore's game room. Basically, I could rent a seat for an hour and play any game or console they had. I liked Gundam and was naturally drawn to games with giant fucking robots. I missed out on Armored Core 4 and 5 during the 360 and PS3 era, but I enjoyed the demo of 4 and always admired the series from afar. I got a copy of Vanilla 4 and 5 Verdict Day ahead of 6's launch. The jank in these games is real. The interesting ideas too. You can see that, given the time to further hone their skills shown in making Souls games, the From could really kick a new Armored Core out of the park. And they did. The gameplay is more how you'd expect a third-person dual analog shooter to control, something the last games didn't. It does this while still feeling like an AC game. You might need to have multiple builds available for different missions. Maybe you're just a goat and can use the same build all game long. Some missions I found myself loading up with heavy shotguns, bazookas, focusing more on dodging attacks and landing heavy hits when an opening presented themselves. But honestly, most of the time I just focused on staggering an enemy and then getting a hit or two in with a massive laser sword. Like I said, I like Gundam. Armored Core 6 is a fantastic game and I can't wait to go through and experience New Game Plus so I can see another side of the story and the world of Rubicon. Resident Evil 4 Remake. I'm in high school and the Wii is the biggest thing in the world. I'm on summer vacation with my family in Algonquin, Maine, and I've dragged said Nintendo console along with me. I could be out at the beach or in the touristy town center getting fudge or ice cream or whatever, but I'm not. I'm swiping at our rental house's TV, Wii remote in hand. I'm fighting my ex-colleague Jack Krauser with a knife. Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube was a masterclass in game design, and things like motion controls and mobile phone ports didn't dilute that. The loop of needing to preserve ammo by efficiently taking down enemies, looting them for currency, talking to a shady merchant to upgrade your weapon and buy and take down more enemies, all while playing inventory Tetris and trying to save the president's daughter in a gross action horror adventure, still plays well today, and it still looks great to boot. So the question is, did we even need a remake? This isn't Resident Evil 2 or 3. Resident Evil 4, as it is available on modern systems and plays great still. It looks great. And yet, The Resident Evil 4 remake is still fantastic. It feels harder. It feels scarier. It remixes the story and the gameplay in ways that aren't immediately obvious. Even a quote-unquote slight change, like giving the knife limited uses before it breaks, greatly changes the dynamics of combat. 15-year-old Cian wouldn't be able to mindlessly swipe his way through encounters after wildly unloading his pistol into a Las Plagas. The frustrations of escorting Ashley to safety also feel improved in smart ways that don't remove the tension driving so much of the game, that need to protect this young woman, but still feel more modern than the original. It's quite impressive how Capcom keeps managing to knock these Resident Evil remakes out of the park. Even 3, while slight in comparison to the 2 remake, was a fun time. And now we're reaching an interesting crossroads. On the one hand, you, or Capcom really, can continue along, remaking and fixing the flaws of the much less loved Resident Evils 5 and 6. Or you can go back further into the past, remake the original Resident Evil again. Do a Code Veronica remake, which, yeah, it really needs. Or update 0 into this style of gameplay. I'm curious to see where Capcom goes, because I doubt this is the last we've seen of Resident Evil remakes. Street Fighter 6. Okay, so maybe we should talk about Capcom for a second. My last role in games was working at Enway, developers of Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. As part of that role, I led a lot of the marketing content rollout for the Street Fighter crossover. This involved working pretty closely with the fine folks over at the Capsule Corporation. But there's no bias or anything here, and I just really felt the need to say that. Exoprimal isn't on this list. I was actually pretty disappointed by Resident Evil 8. I'm still upset over Dead Rising 4. But my god, Street Fighter 6 is hot. It has far more personality than Street Fighter 5. Well, aside from that logo. Yikes. And feels more accessible to newcomers as well. And that's because they put Yakuza in Street Fighter? Street Fighter 6 introduces the World Tour mode, a Yakuza-light, RPG-ish single-player story mode that also serves as a great tutorial for new players. You create your own fighter, and throughout the story, meet different masters who train you in their style. These masters have names like Chun-Li, Ken, E. Honda, Ryu. You get the point. You learn from the Street Fighter 6 character roster. This lets you take on their fighting styles and build your character to play in a way that's similar to a character you might like. Of course, you don't get all these masters at the start, and the game may force you to learn how to play in ways you aren't normally used to. Stat differences between you and opponents you fight could be grinded out so you can cheese your way through a battle, but when those gaps present themselves, it feels highly intentional. It's like a FromSoft game. Have you learned how to play your character? Have you learned how to best counter this style? Do you actually have mastery over this game? I felt my admittedly poor skills as a fighting game player jump leaps and bounds as I played. And this is done in a way that feels far more natural than hitting up the lab and going through move tutorials one by one. Sure, the biome of Metro City can feel empty when compared to an Itembori or a Kamurocho, but it gets the job done. And of course, the fighting itself is great. Drive parries feel like a little easier to use evolution of the Street Fighter 3 parry system. The drive rushing makes closing the gap between opponents much easier and quicker. Drive reversals are a lot like the really cool counters that you would see in Street Fighter 4 and 5, and they have this awesome like graffiti splatter effect. There's just a lot of really cool new systems added in to the game. I also really like the new characters, Kimberly and Jamie especially. This is a big deal for me because I didn't love the characters added in Street Fighter 4 or Street Fighter 5 for the most part. I mean, okay, Juri, who's back in this game, is great, and Rashid, who's available as DLC, are awesome. But characters like Laura, Abel, Rufus, they didn't do anything for me. 6's roster does. But seriously, Capcom, where's Hakan? Bring Hakan back, god damn it. There have been issues with Street Fighter 6's monetization around costumes and everything. I don't want to downplay that. There has to be a much better way to do this, right? But this is still a fantastic fighting game and a fantastic entry point for players new to the genre and looking to join the community. Pseudo regalia. As I awake, I look in the mirror. I'm not sure where I am, but it seems like a prison. A small creature idles near me, and they say something that raises an eyebrow. I make my way through the following rooms, and I crumble across a weapon. I learn to slide. I progress through this prison, realizing it is in fact a castle. Where am I? Who am I? Why is there no map? Seriously, a map would be nice, and it's coming, but it wasn't while I played. Pseudo Regalia started as a Metroidvania game jam game, but grew into a full title. It's available on Steam and itch.io for $6, and if its inclusion on this list doesn't make it clear already, it's well worth it. It combines the aesthetics of N64 titles with more modern controls and movement tech, and that's really why it's here. This game just feels good. In a year where Spider-Man 2 came out, I think Pseudo Regalia's movement toolbox is still my favorite. Moving around feels so good that the hours I wasted trying to figure out how the spaces of this world connect together didn't rub me nearly as poorly as they would have otherwise. And again, a map will solve that, and it's apparently coming. There's a sense of mystery here, as the game doesn't give you too much direction. You basically have to find, I think it's 4 or 5 fragments to open a gateway at the top of a tower. My gameplay footage might actually just answer this question for me. I honestly should have looked while I recorded this audio. But the order of getting those and how you do so is kind of up to you. Abilities and skills are littered throughout the castle, but you can just as easily manipulate the movement skills you already have to often do things you maybe shouldn't be able to. I love that. The N64 aesthetics are great too. It's not that it's just a low poly 3D game, it's the dithering, the way everything looks. This isn't a 90s 3D game. It's not a PlayStation game. It's like a game born of a world where a dual analog N64 controller existed. I'm excited to see what the team behind Pseudo Regalia do next. Well, besides adding a map into the game. Hi-Fi Rush. I've got my head, but my head is unraveling. Can't keep control. Can't keep track of where it's traveling. I've got my heart, but my heart's no good. And you're the only one that's understood. I go along, but I don't know where you're taking me. I twist and turn, but you're wrenching, dragging, shaking me. Turn off the sun, pull the stars from the sky. The more I give to you, the more I die. No. We're not here to talk about David Lynch's underappreciated film, Lost Highway, nor the accompanying Nine Inch Nails single, The Perfect Drug, written for the film. And no, we're not talking about Fortnite Festival, at least not yet, from my one-time employer Harmonix Music Systems, who released said Nine Inch Nails songs as early DLC for the original Rock Band. We are instead talking about the latest game from the Evil Within developer, Tango Gameworks, Hi-Fi Rush. Okay, maybe we should talk about Rock Band real quick. I love rhythm games. I worked on Rock Band 4. My senior thesis in college was a rhythm game. I was making my own rhythm game prior to joining Harmonix. Maybe one day I'll make another one. At one stage of my life, I even pitched a project at a game pitching competition that I tentatively titled Killer Groove. It was a rhythm-based fighting game. So, when Xbox Game Studios Shadow dropped a rhythm-based character action game with a comic book meets anime visual style, I was excited. And then they put bands like Nine Inch Nails and Zwan in it. Anyone who knows me knows my obsession with Trent Reznor's musical works, and for this game to feature multiple Nine Inch Nails tracks made it feel tailor-built for me. And honestly, just the audacity to have the Billy Corgan side project Zwan in a game made me want to root for Hi-Fi Rush. But, all that aside, it's a great game. The rhythm elements are mostly additive, with QTE events being the main element where some rhythm mastery is mandatory. Chai, the protagonist, is a doofus, but in an incredibly endearing way. His allies are similarly great, and using their abilities in concert with your standard dash attacks, air juggles, it's a really compelling combat system. And the game is just so vibrant. It is a hard 180 from titles like The Evil Within 1 and 2 and Tango Gameworks' most recent game, Ghostwire Tokyo, that it really shows just how capable this studio is and how lucky Xbox Game Studios is to have them in their stable now. Lies of P. Recently, I tried out a game called The Surge 2. It has interesting ideas about body modification and is a sci fi Souls like title that implements mechanics to enable those ideas. You can target specific limbs to remove them from an enemy and gain their weapons or body mods, enabling you to build them yourself and attach them. It's cool stuff. It's better than what little I played of The Surge 1, that's for sure. But, I don't know, man. It's still not very good. And that really seems to be pretty common with a lot of non-FromSoft Souls-like games. Neo, the Star Wars Jedi games, Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy, and Ashen, those are good games, but they still lack a certain je ne sais quoi that titles like Demon Souls, Bloodborne, or Elden Ring provide in droves. So when I heard a Korean studio was making specifically a Bloodborne-like game based off Pinocchio, I was incredibly curious. It looked great. That Twinkie Timothy Chalamet design of our titular puppet and the integration of lying as a mechanic to change your interactions with the characters felt interesting and different. And just the idea of this story that is so immortalized as a Disney children's film being this violent, desolate world where puppets are rebelling against their masters. Like, what the fuck is even happening? I'm here for it. But this studio, as far as I knew, had no track record to speak of, and it's still a non-FromSoft Souls-like, and Bloodborne at that, which is still my favorite FromSoft game. How would it actually compare? I'm here to tell you, I absolutely adored this game. It seems to best understand the spirit of FromSoft's titles, while still feeling confident enough to do its own thing where it feels it needs to. The lore, the narrative, they are all far more direct than, say, Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 2 or Dark Souls 3. The larger world is still told through item descriptions, but story objects in the world also help flesh it out in a way that molds the dreaded environmental storytelling tropes with the way Souls games typically tell their stories. And there are other systems like the P organ, which lets you customize your character's inventory options, the amount of health they can regenerate with their Estus Flask equivalent, the Legion Arm system, which gives Pinocchio a badass left arm that can either shoot flames or arrows or be a shield or a grappling hook. Or things like hilt switching, where you can actually kind of pair different blades and different hilts together to create your own weapons. Really do help this game kind of emerge from more than just being a Bloodborne homage with Pinocchio in it. Oh, and this game sets up a Buckwild sequel. Something is telling me we might not be in Kansas anymore with this next game. Alan Wake 2. The year is 1990, and a little show debuted on ABC. With a 90-minute pilot, it set the world on fire. Commercials would air in Japan featuring the cast drinking Japanese coffee brands because, you see, that's a damn fine cup of coffee. And hot, too. Twin Peaks, for a brief moment, took the world by storm. Its influence on culture still reaches far and wide, and games are no exception to this. Deadly Premonition is a direct homage to David Lynch and Mark Frost's franchise. Link's Awakening, the Zelda game, is inspired by the Lynchian surrealism of what otherwise seems like a quirky murder mystery soap opera. Link meets Mario characters on the Dream Island of Koholnet, and much like my game Pocket Mystery EP, there is even a room that is a direct homage to the chevron floors of the Black Lodge. And in 2010, a little game called Alan Wake came out. It blended Twin Peaks homage in a Pacific Northwest setting with Stephen King. It was interesting in concept, but just fine in execution. It, like Season 2 of Twin Peaks, ended on a what the fuck ending that left fans wanting more. And, much like Season 2 of Twin Peaks, seemed unlikely to happen, though. But then things changed. In 2017, Twin Peaks returned with, well, Twin Peaks: The Return. The David Lynch of it all became more vivid, with entire episodes seemingly focusing on dream logic and nothing wrapping up in an immediately obvious way. It was more immediate in its darkness and weirdness. Episode 8 of the 17-part event series opened with a band called The Nine Inch Nails performing She's Gone Away by the band Nine Inch Nails, which I am told is a completely different band than the one in the show. Before the episode goes on a bizarre, terrifying visual odyssey that explains the origins of much of the darkness in Twin Peaks world. In the 6 years since the show came out, there haven't really been any big budget games that evoke the vibes of the return. Except Alan Wake 2, which somehow happened. Pitched as Remedy's take on survival horror, it's weirder, darker, and zanier than the original game, and it also plays fucking amazingly. Taking on the twin roles of Alan Wake and newcomer Saga Anderson, you'll go through a nightmare hellscape inspired by New York as one, and investigate the Pacific Northwest setting of the original game as the other. Oh, and there's a musical sequence. This is a horror game that has a musical sequence. The flashlight mechanics of the original return, but feel more vital as enemies are more intimidating, taking more hits and ammo is scarcer. It's far more intimidating than the also great and also on this list Resident Evil 4 remake. And again, there is a fucking musical sequence. The game also ties into Remedy's control in smart ways. This doesn't feel like a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie where you're completely lost on the plot altogether if you don't know what an AWE is or who the FBC are, but it enhances the experience if you do. It's additive. It's really smartly done. Remedy hit it out of the park with this one, and I'm really excited to see what's next, both in terms of the Alan Wake DLC we know is coming, the Control sequel that maybe will bring in some elements from this. Maybe, I don't know. Uh, and yeah, all I can just say is remember, it's not a loop, it's a spiral. Baldur's Gate 3. In the flaming crash site of a Mind Flayer ship, a drow named Tal awakens. Wait, drow? Drow? Oh boy, we're off to a terrible start here, huh? Let's just go with drow for this video. A drow named Tal awakens, wondering what happened. They get up and proceed onward. This drow rogue yearns to be free of the prejudices plaguing their people and make a new life for themselves in the land of Baldur's Gate. And somehow they got a fucking tadpole forced into their brain. After fighting their way off a Mind Flayer ship, with assistance from a kinda intense lady named Lizelle, Tal meets a kinda hot lady named Shadowheart. Together they start a quest, meeting the incredibly horny Asterion, a spoilers, vampire elf, a wizard who has some serious addiction issues, a guy who made a deal with a literal devil, and more. Asterion won't stop hitting on Tal, and even non-consensually draws blood, putting Tal off the vampire lad altogether. Tal goes and has a nice kiss with their partner Shadowheart, and that starts to develop into something more. Uh, their party repeatedly tries and fails to eliminate the leaders of a goblin camp, eventually succeeding, though. And in the process of succeeding, they save refugees in a nearby druid enclave. And from there, they make their way to the Underdark. Baldur's Gate 3 almost didn't get on this list. I've been really hot and cold on it. My non-binary Drow Rogue is having one hell of a sex life, but I keep having the worst luck in my roles anywhere else in the game. Never seeming to be able to succeed in using the environment to my advantage, and I keep getting my ass handed to me. It's also the only game in the list I haven't finished. I'm not even done with Act 1. This game is hard. It's long, and for me at least, it's often frustrating to play. But the characters are incredibly charming. Seeing how everything interacts with one another is also just completely mind boggling. There are so many things happening behind the scenes here. The feeling of triumph when you do succeed is incredibly rewarding in of itself. And in a world where BioWare hasn't really put out a game worth playing in a very long time, like literally nearly a decade, Mass Effect Andromeda was it was fine. Anthem broke my heart. I, as a former EA employee, um, Baldur's Gate 3 and the work Larian has done really brings that BioWare spirit back in a way that I didn't know I needed. So I'm excited to keep playing through Baldur's Gate 3 in small chunks on my Steam Deck. And while I'm in the minority of not thinking this is the best game of the year, I still think, quirks and all, it's a damn good one. Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. When I started writing these blurbs, it really felt like Sega no longer understood the concept of love. Jet Set or Jet Grind Radio and Jet Set Radio Future were fantastic stylish games that had that uniquely Sega quality to them, and we've seen nothing from them in a long time. Jet Set Radio got an HD re-release in the early 2010s, but Future hasn't left the original Xbox. So when Sega unveiled the new Jet Set Radio game as part of the Game Awards, I was super happy. But it's been a long time, and others have tried to fill the void. Games like Hover Rise of Gamers, tried to ape the vibes and the style, but failed. And so, when Team Reptile, creators of Lethal League, announced Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, my interest peaked. This was a team that had the style part down, and that includes the music. Hideki Nagonama had provided some tracks for the second Lethal League, and was going to provide some tracks for this new title as well. I was optimistic. Maybe, just maybe, we had a game on our hands that was from a team that understood the concept of love. And then honestly, I kind of forgot it was coming out this year. But then when a friend posted about it in a Discord server, I panicked. I panicked, but I eventually bought the game. I played it on my Steam Deck for basically every night after that. And I was immediately sucked into the world of New Amsterdam. The story of street art and free living going up against a corrupt militarized police force doesn't play out quite as you might expect, but it's a journey worth going on. And damn, it just plays so smoothly. More than ever, doing tricks on a bike, rollerblades, or skateboard feels like peak Tony Hawk. And then it's combined with parkour and graffiti tagging in city spaces that just feel bustling with life and just have this real energy to them. Competing against the other gangs for the all city supremacy prevents a variety of challenges that really make the game really fun and force you to hone in on different skills. So I loved Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. I am so glad somebody was able to take up the mantle of the Jet Set Radio franchise and do their own thing with it. And it makes me optimistic that Sega hopefully is also paying attention as they work on their own new Jet Set Radio entry. But with that, it's time for our game of the year. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is an underappreciated game in the Xbox 360 catalog. It's a little lacking in polish, and it's not the third Banjo Kazooie game people wanted Rare to make. I get that. I really do. But it's a game that really encourages player creativity. Building the right vehicle for the right situation is paramount to succeeding in the wacky world of games that Banjo and Kazooie are transported to. Talented players could also make some wacky contraptions to go about finishing levels and objectives in fascinating ways. It's a fun game, and it's playable on the Xbox Series X via backwards compatibility. You should totally play it. 2017's Nintendo Wii U Swansong and Nintendo Switch launch title The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild reinvigorated the Zelda franchise, creating that sense of discovery and wilderness of the NES original. It took the open world template and stripped away the excess in smart ways. There are still hundreds of things to find, but your map isn't littered with icons directing you to do them. It trusts you as a player. What it lacks in compelling dungeons, it more than makes up for in exploration and sheer awe. Nintendo's follow-up doesn't mess with what's broken. It just throws in some nuts, and some bolts, and some sky, and some underground. It takes away some Sheikah, but adds some Zonai. Okay, I'm talking nonsense. Let's get to it. Tears of the Kingdom picks up sometime after Breath of the Wild. Link and Zelda have explored some ruins and uncovered some seemingly mummified corpse. With that, the terror truly begins. Zelda goes missing. Link loses an arm. This corpse reanimates as the Master Sword shatters. Reawakening on a sky island far above Hyrule, Link gains a prosthetic arm and meets the Zonai. He learns that a great change has come to the land below. Holes litter the world, leading to an Underdark where the Ganon-worshipping Yiga clan have found themselves. Link can traverse the skies, but also plummet back down to the Hyrule of Breath of the Wild below, or plunge even further into the underworld, the depths, to explore further. In his quest to find Zelda, he learns the origins of Ganon and Ganondorf. Link has new abilities this time, and they feel like a smart evolution of your Breath of the Wild skill set. Combining items together with Fuse lets players quickly craft fire, electricity, and ice arrows as necessary. Need to blow something up, just fuse a bomb flower to an arrow and let loose. Find a rusty claymore and want to beef it up? Fuse Zonai charges to it and make a Zonai weapon. There are so many cool permutations waiting to be taken advantage of, and it's just as fun experimenting with them in my explorations. Some power-ups, like Ascend, add quality of life elements to the game. Instead of climbing a big mountain, which I enjoyed more than most, find a cave beneath it and just ascend your way to the top. Or build a hot air balloon and dive to the top. See, I like Banjo nuts and bolts and the creative toolbox of Tears of the Kingdom's Ultra Hand power. It really appeals to me. It's cool seeing what people online made, be it a giant flame-throwing penis robot or a straight-up mecha. Combining a rocket to a shield to let you fly up into the sky is also just like really genius that you could just kind of think on the fly like that and find novel workarounds to annoying problems like climbing. I just really liked the story. It's nothing groundbreaking, but I felt like the emotional beats landed really well, and when they needed to, they hit really hard. I won't say how the game ends, but it just really worked for me. Look, I get that a lot of people didn't get the same hit from Tears of the Kingdom that they did from Breath of the Wild. I get that some people found Baldur's Gate 3 more impressive because of its scope and narrative complexities, but I can't lie to myself about the awe and wonder I had playing this game. I don't usually put 100 plus hours into a single game, unless you call Persona, but I did for Tears of the Kingdom in the span of a month and a half. I took time while abroad on vacation in Europe each day to stop and play it. No other game on my list can say that. With time, I may find that it didn't resonate with me quite as much as Breath of the Wild, but for now, it's a damned masterpiece if you ask me. Alright, let's start with the first misfire of the year. I don't really take a lot of joy in talking about games that I don't think are good, but I also think it's important when we look at these major, massive budget games to call out when they really didn't hit for us. This isn't even saying a game is bad necessarily. It just means it didn't hit, right? Last year, my misfire of the year was God of War Ragnarok. I loved the first God of War, and I really wanted to enjoy the sequel. And the fact that I didn't make me feel good. I didn't really feel good having a conversation with someone I knew who worked at Santa Monica, being like, "I think the game's kind of bad. Sorry," but I also don't want to pretend that that's not the case. And I think it's also important to talk about our experiences of being let down experiencing media. And this first one, it is a big letdown. So, our first misfire of the year, Final Fantasy 16. With combat design handled by a designer known for some of the best character action games ever, incredible artistic direction, and fantastic voice acting, it's not really a game you'd expect to be just the shocking letdown that it was. It was directed by the man who saved a failing MMO one that is now playable free up to level 60 with expansion Heavensward included. Yeah, Final Fantasy 16. Look, when the first trailer for the game debuted at the PlayStation 5 reveal showcase, I was mixed. It looked dark and gritty, and while I'm actually super open to that, it felt dark and gritty in a way that somehow managed to feel more edgelordy than the honestly more interesting Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins. But I want to keep an open mind. Learning that the designer of the combat systems for titles like Devil May Cry 5 was building the combat system gave me hope. I don't want to get into the what is a Final Fantasy even discourse because I don't have a clear answer. And I don't think Final Fantasy 16's failures aren't because it's not a Final Fantasy game. Its failures are much more simple than that. It's a story about slavery that explicitly went out of its way to exclude people of color. And then at some stage, it kind of ditches the whole let's liberate the slaves of the world to do the usual JRPG, anime, Final Fantasy as fuck, fight God story nonsense. It's a really jarring shift, too. It feels like the story up until a certain point just kind of gets thrown out so that you can battle the god Ultima. And again, this is a game where in pre-release interviews, Yoshi P basically said it didn't make sense for black people to exist in this world. And yet this is a story that for most of its runtime is about slavery. And it's just white people and tan people. And it's a little weird. Its failures are also that the combat is mindless. It is so easy. The simplistic leveling system isn't inherently an issue. I love Final Fantasy 13 and the Crystarium is baby's first sphere grid. They don't really matter. Its failures are that for any sense of challenge or reason to experiment with the game's different movesets, you have to beat the game on its normal difficulty to unlock a harder Final Fantasy difficulty. Its failures are plotting fetch quests that neither provide much insight to the world or characters, nor do they succeed in providing interesting rewards or gameplay. And you start to see where that MMO design methodology comes into a format that just doesn't work. This is a single player AAA experience, not an MMO where you spend thousands of hours playing with your friends, grinding out the best gear, doing fashion, raids, etc. Look, every Final Fantasy game over the past 20 years has been divisive. I loved 15. Like, seriously, it was in my top 10 games of the 2010s. I have a very special place in my heart for that game. I don't know that the criticisms people have of it are things that I view as detriments. I don't disparage their opinions, but I like a lot of the things that people say make the game bad. Not everything, but that's another video. I loved parts of the very flawed 13 trilogy. That combat system is a lot of fun. 10 and 12 are also just fantastic. And yeah, 14 is an incredible MMO and more importantly, an incredible story of a team taking a game that was so incredibly derided and deemed a failure at its launch and turning it into one of the most well-received experiences available in gaming today. That is an impressive feat for any team to pull off. So, all I can say is that I really hope the DLC is more interesting than the main game. I know that as I record this audio, the first part of it released as a shadow drop at the Game Awards, but I haven't gotten to play it yet. But the base game, it bummed me out. So, yeah, Final Fantasy 16, the first misfire of 2023. Fortnite Festival. In late 2007, I was suffering from a deep depression. It was the second time in my life I had entered such a period, the first being just 2 years prior. Besides my occasional shift to GameStop, I refused to leave the house and was plagued by panic attacks multiple times a day. Like seriously, I didn't go to school for like 2 months. My friends barely heard from me. That Christmas, while in the midst of this, I got a little game called Rock Band. I was already a fan of Harmonix's work after playing Guitar Hero 1 and 2 and a demo of Frequency years prior, not knowing it was the same studio. I liked music games in general. I was a little disappointed by Guitar Hero 3. For as happy as I was to see Dragon Force in the game after being introduced to the band a year prior, it lacked that certain something. It felt more corporate, with real guitarists in it and ads for Axe body spray throughout. I was excited to try Rock Band, which, by virtue of introducing drums, vocals, and a co op career mode that was more in depth than the standard play songs to unlock more songs modes of Guitar Hero, it felt like an actual evolution on the formula from Guitar Hero 2. I fell in love with it immediately. The presentation felt more polished and sophisticated, the love for music more immediate. The weekly downloadable content kept things fresh. Rock Band 2 brought with it more difficulty and more metal. And the Beatles, Lego, and Rock Band 3 brought their own great stuff to the formula. Realizing I'd probably never live and work in Japan for someone like Konami, which, I mean, also in 2023, do I really want to work for Konami? Uh, Harmonix felt like my dream job. Seriously, in high school, I would just go off about wanting to work at Harmonix and one day that I'd work on Rock Band. Um, so fast forward, it's 2015. Rock Band 4 has just launched. I'm kind of miserable. My health is plummeting, and I'm basically just reading people shit on the game. And I get it. After the critical triumph of Rock Band 3, seriously, if you're not aware, it's one of the highest rated games on Metacritic for the Xbox 360. This game feels lesser. It's made by a smaller team on a smaller budget. It hurt more too because, well, you see, I was part of that team. I have complicated feelings about the whole ordeal, but Rock Band 4 is a solid game that stumbled a little out of the gate. It did better than I think people realize, but in the years since, Harmonix seems to have constantly struggled to find a new idea and a new way to succeed. Drop Mix was just too expensive. The VR titles were a mixed bag. Fuser was a really fun experience, but let's be real, as a game, it wasn't very good. So, in 2021, when Epic bought Harmonix, I just went, huh. I didn't discount, for a variety of reasons, the possibility of a Rock Band like mode in Fortnite. But when Fortnite Festival was announced and when PDP started teasing controllers, I was a little surprised. I was also a little excited. But man, what the fuck? What happened? This is store brand Rock Band. That's an oversimplification, but this game just feels bad to play. It's shockingly hard to believe this is the team that brought us games like Amplitude, Guitar Hero, even gamepad based Rock Band like titles like Rock Band Blitz, and so on and so forth. Hitting and missing notes lacks juice. The feedback just isn't there. The co op play experience doesn't feel very cooperative. It all just feels half baked. There are things that differentiate this from just being a gamepad or, I guess, keyboard Rock Band like title or a Rock Band 5, but the core beat matching note highway gameplay is shockingly bad. The business model, it also just feels off. There's a set of songs you can play for free. I assume that, like a League of Legends champion, they'll rotate in and out. Right now, it's just 3 or so weekend songs, Lady Gaga, Billie Eilish, The White Stripes, and some quote unquote original Fortnite music. It's very much music you'd expect in Fortnite. Songs can be unlocked via a festival pass, but can also be bought in the Fortnite store. The festival pass, for what it's worth, does seem to be separate from the standard Fortnite battle pass. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure, but this maybe points to my confusion around how things work. And again, songs can also be bought in the Fortnite store, except they seem like they cost twice as much as Rock Band DLC. For context, a song in Rock Band 4 runs $1.99 before tax. Songs in Fortnite Festival seem to run at 500 V-Bucks a pop. This appears to be the equivalent of about $4.50 American. That's more than twice as much before tax. I have no desire to pay that much for a single song. I can buy an entire pack of songs for DJ Maxx during a Steam sale for that much. That gets me 10 songs or so. I could buy a Rock Band DLC pack of 3 songs for the same cost as a single song in Fortnite Festival. I'm not really sure what's going on there. Sure, inflation is a thing. Sure, Epic, I guess, is spending more money than it makes, and the game industry is fucked as a whole, but this doesn't encourage me to stay with this game and play the songs available. And yeah, it's just really disappointing. I hope Harmonix and I hope Epic can turn this around, but as it stands, this feels like a hollow successor to the formula that made Rock Band work so well. But even if they do, this once again just feels like a game that came out too soon. But all right, that's enough negativity. Let's close out with some quick hits of other great games for the year and games I wish I had more time to play, or honestly, time to play at all. Exit 8. Exit 8 is just your normal, run of the mill, hour long foreign subway system set walking sim. Walk to the exit of the tunnel. That's all there is to it. Yep, definitely. Nothing to see here, but definitely worth your $4. Super Mario RPG. They took a great game and then they updated the graphics and the music. The cutscenes have dialogue but not voiceovers, and I find that a little weird in this day and age. But smart additions like the combo gauge and the triple move attacks make battles way more compelling and interesting than they were in the original. Theatrhythm Final Bar Line. One of my favorite 3DS games was this Final Fantasy rhythm title, Theatrhythm Final Fantasy. Now it's back with more music than ever and a shit ton of DLC from titles like Nier, Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, Octopath Traveler, The World Ends With You, and more. What more could I ask for? El Paso Elsewhere. My biggest issue with the Remedy Max Payne games was that they lacked music by health and that you didn't fight vampires. Rockstar San Diego solved the former issue by having health do the soundtrack for Max Payne 3. Indie developer Strange Scaffold solved the latter with El Paso Elsewhere, a very fun but little bit buggy Max Payne-like game where your ex is like the Lord of Vampires and is taking hostages in a nearby motel, and you have to go and deal with that. And I guess this all happened because you broke up with them. It's really fun. It's a little buggy, but it is definitely worth checking out if you're in the mood for a Max Payne like slow-mo, bullet time dodging third-person shooter. Metroid Prime Remastered. They just took one of my favorite games of all time. They gave it a beautiful coat of paint and added proper dual analog stick controls. This almost made the top 10 by just being Metroid fucking Prime, but that felt like cheating. But I still need to shout it out, so there you have it. Mario Wonder. I don't have an axe to grind with the new Super Mario Brothers games. I get the complaints though. They're rather anodyne and they don't bring much new to the table besides easier difficulty options and kind of chaotic multiplayer. Wonder, on the other hand, it feels, well, wonderful. It's full of life and character that the new games don't have. The Wonder Seeds make for a trippy experience, and the weird Death Stranding like Souls like see other players' actions in the world really make this feel like a communal 2D Mario experience that I didn't know I needed. It's great. And that's it. Before we fully close out, though, I just wanted to have some quick hits on some other games that I really want to check out, but haven't gotten to really do so in any tangible way yet. So here we go. Knuckle Sandwich, an Earthbound-like RPG that was in development for forever, finally came out. Seriously, I backed this in 2018 on Kickstarter, and I had known about it for a while before that Kickstarter started. So to see it come out in November 2023, great. It comes in waves. What if Journey, but it wasn't really a calm, serene experience and just kind of hella stressful and had permadeath? Lunacid. What if instead of trying to make a Souls like everybody else is doing, a team just made a game in the vein of the predecessor to the Souls series with a Kingsfield like? Sprawl, a boomer shooter that just kind of has these like Ghost in the Shell anime cyberpunk vibes. I've got this game on Steam and haven't played it yet, and I just really want to. Thirsty Suitors, Scott Pilgrim meets Mario RPG, I guess. I've only played a little bit, but I really enjoyed that little bit, and I want to play more. But all right, thank you so much for watching the very first episode of Cian's Canon Corner. Most episodes, when they happen in the future, will be focused on a single title. They will be more directly linked to the work I'm doing and how they have inspired me. But for this first episode, I want to have a little fun and just wax poetic about my favorite games, my disappointments, and all that for the year of 2023. So, as always, like the video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and share it with your friends. That will help get more people's eyes on it. The more people that watch it and the longer they watch it, the better the channel will do, and hopefully that will lead to more people playing my games upon release. Speaking of, Pocket Mystery EP is now available for download completely for free on itch.io. You can search Pocket Mystery EP on itch and you'll find the page, or you can go to www.pocketmystery.games. That's a plural, GAMES. I almost forgot how to spell games plurally, which is weird. But you can go to that website and also download it that way. The game is available as a Game Boy ROM file as well as a analog pocket file. I'll be talking a little bit more about my feelings on the finished product in the new year, but I'm just glad to have it out there so I can focus full steam ahead on my next game. See you in 2024.